The market square of Eldridge was alive with the vibrant colors of stalls overflowing with fruits and flowers. Merchants called out their wares, and the rich scent of baked bread wafted through the air, mingling with the laughter of children and the chatter of townsfolk. In the heart of this bustling scene, a young woman weaved through the throngs, her heart racing with each step. Lady Isadora Pelham had disguised herself as a commoner, donning a simple brown dress that did little to reveal her noble lineage. The lowly attire allowed her to blend in with the crowd, but it could not hide the fire of determination burning within her. Quick thing before we continue, I'm going to be honest with you, creating this content is a dream come true for me. But reaching 1,000 subscribers feels so far away sometimes. If these stories touch your heart too, would you help me? Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share with someone you know will love this. Every single subscription brings me closer to doing what I love and bringing you even more of these beautiful romances. Alright, now let's get back to the magic. As she moved among the people, Isadora was acutely aware of the contrasts that surrounded her. The joyful sounds of the market echoed in her ears, yet her thoughts were clouded with memories of a life that felt like a distant dream. Once, she had been the radiant lady of Harrington Manor, poised and elegant, with a future bound by the expectations of her station. Now, she was a ghost of that life, seeking refuge in anonymity. The joy of the market, with its laughter and warmth, stood in stark contrast to the turmoil that churned inside her. Isadora paused for a moment, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. She could see children playing, their laughter piercing through her somber reflection. It reminded her of the moments she had cherished before her world shattered with the loss of her childhood love. The memories of those carefree days were like bittersweet music playing in the back of her mind. She had chosen to escape, to sever the ties that bound her to the past, but escaping her memories proved far more difficult than shedding her noble title. As she approached a stall overflowing with plump apples, the vendor greeted her with a warm smile. "Good day, miss. Would you care for some fruit?" he asked, his hands calloused from years of labor. Isadora returned his smile, feeling a flicker of normalcy in the man's friendly demeanor. "Yes, please. I'll take two." It was the small pleasures in life that reminded her of the human connection she had longed for. As she exchanged coins for the apples, she caught sight of a well-dressed gentleman surveying the market from a distance. An inexplicable sense of unease washed over her, and she quickly turned away to continue her path. The young woman's heart raced as she navigated through the crowd, acutely aware of the importance of her disguise. It was not merely a change of clothing but a transformation of self. She had taken on a new identity, shedding the expectations of her title and embracing the unknown path that lay ahead. The pain of her past lingered, yet she felt an exhilarating sense of freedom in her bold choice to reinvent herself. Each step, each whispered conversation, was a chance for rebirth. She was determined to forge a new identity away from the shadows of her lost love. Isadora's thoughts drifted back to the man who had once occupied her heart, the Duke of Harrington. The memory of his gentle smile and tender words haunted her, but she could not allow herself to dwell on that past. The weight of society's expectations had driven them apart, and as she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, she felt the heaviness of those lost dreams. She had fled to escape the confines of her world, yet the ghosts of her past still whispered through the corners of her mind. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the market. Isadora took a deep breath, inhaling the mixture of aromas that filled the air, and allowed herself a small moment to savor the beauty around her. She was not yet certain of the future she was building, but she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. The bustling market was a place alive with potential, and perhaps, just perhaps, it could provide the new beginnings she so desperately sought. As she wandered further into the heart of the market, her resolve solidified. She would not simply hide from her past, she would confront it in a new light. Engaging with the townsfolk, she practiced her new voice, one that would be foreign yet familiar to those who had once known her. "Excuse me, sir, may I help you with that?" she offered to a gentleman struggling with a bundle of hay. The words rolled off her tongue, tinged with a lightness that hinted at her determination. The kindness of the townspeople sparked a warmth in her heart, and she found herself smiling more easily with each interaction. Yet, beneath the surface, her heart thudded with uncertainty. What would happen if someone recognized her? The thought sent a chill down her spine, but she quickly brushed it aside. She would forge ahead with her plan, determined to see it through, regardless of the risks. Lady Isadora Pelham was no more, she was simply Isadora, a woman seeking her place in a world that had turned its back on her. The uncertainty of her new life filled her with both trepidation and excitement. With every moment spent among the common folk, she felt a piece of her former self fall away, only to be replaced by a version of herself that had long been buried. This was her chance, and she would not squander it. But as she continued to immerse herself in her new life, a familiar voice brushed against her consciousness, sending a shiver down her spine. "Isadora," the voice called out, soft yet firm. The sound sent her heart racing as she spun around, her breath catching in her throat. There, amidst the laughter and cheer of the market, stood a figure she thought she would never see again, the Duke of Harrington, his piercing eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made the air crackle with tension. Little did she know that their destinies were about to intertwine once more. In the opulent estate of Harrington, the Duke of Harrington sat in his grand study, surrounded by the remnants of wealth and power. Golden sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a warm glow on the rich mahogany furniture and the intricate tapestries that adorned the walls. Despite the luxurious surroundings, a profound emptiness plagued his heart, a void that had lingered since Lady Isadora Pelham had mysteriously vanished from his life. The Duke, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of his status, stared out at the perfectly manicured gardens, his thoughts drifting like the leaves in the gentle breeze. Memories of Isadora flooded his mind. He recalled her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled with mischief, and the warmth of her hand in his. The picture of her, radiant and full of life, haunted him. He had searched tirelessly for her, but she remained elusive, a ghost that refused to be found. The weight of societal expectations pressed upon him, reminding him that as a duke, he was bound by duty and honor. Yet, all he could think of was the woman he had lost. As he prepared for the evening's gathering, a grand affair meant to showcase his wealth and influence, the Duke found it increasingly difficult to mask his discontent. The ballroom would be filled with laughter and music, yet his heart remained heavy with sorrow. He had become adept at wearing a facade, but the internal struggle was ever present. Guests would expect a charming host, but inside he felt like a mere shell of the man he once was. The evening wore on, and the guests began to arrive. High society filled the estate, adorned in silks and jewels that shimmered like stars against the night sky. The atmosphere buzzed with the rustle of gowns and the clinking of crystal glasses, but for Harrington, it was all mere background noise. He exchanged pleasantries with his guests, smiling and nodding, but his thoughts continuously returned to Isadora. Would she ever return? Could he ever love again without her? In the midst of the gathering, the Duke caught sight of a woman who moved through the crowd like a whisper. She appeared to be a servant, offering refreshments with a grace that held an uncanny familiarity. The moment he heard her voice, his heart leapt. It was a voice he thought he would never hear again, yet it was disguised beneath the guise of a commoner. Isadora, attempting to blend into her surroundings, had taken on a new identity. The fear of being recognized sent her pulse racing, but the thrill of weaving through the crowd filled her with a sense of purpose. While she served the guests, she felt a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. Each time she handed a glass of wine or a plate of delicacies, she reminded herself of why she had chosen this path. It was her only chance to reclaim her life away from the shackles of her past. As the Duke turned towards her, their eyes locked for a fleeting moment, and an electric current surged between them. Recognition sparked in his eyes, but Isadora, unaware of his presence, continued her duties, her heart pounding in her chest as she fought to maintain her composure. She poured a glass for another guest, all the while feeling an inexplicable pull toward the man who had once held her heart. The air grew thick with tension as Harrington observed her from across the room. He could hardly focus on the conversations around him. All he could think of was how she moved, how she laughed, and how the light caught her hair, even under the dullness of her servant attire. His instincts screamed that it was her, yet he struggled to reconcile this with the reality of her disappearance. Could it truly be Isadora, or was this a cruel trick of his imagination? In a moment filled with unspoken words, Isadora accidentally brushed against the Duke as she served a passing guest. The brief contact sent a shiver through her, and she breathed in his familiar scent, a blend of leather and cedar that brought back a flood of memories. It took everything in her not to turn and address him, to break the fragile barrier she had constructed around her heart. But she pressed on, the weight of her disguise heavy on her shoulders. Harrington felt a rush of emotions, joy, apprehension, and a deep-seated fear of losing her again. He struggled to mask his emotions as he engaged with the other guests, their laughter ringing hollow in his ears. How could he confront her? How could he reveal that he knew the truth without putting her in danger? As the evening progressed, the Duke found himself drawn to her like a moth to a flame, desperate to understand the truth behind her disguise. He engaged in light conversation with others, yet his gaze wandered back to the woman who had captivated him once more. The delicate balance between hope and dread filled the air between them. Isadora, sensing the intensity of his gaze, felt her heart race uncontrollably. She could not shake the feeling that she was under scrutiny, and though she tried to focus on her task, her thoughts were consumed by the man whose presence loomed large in the room. Was it possible he recognized her? The idea terrified her. As the final moments of the gathering approached, Harrington resolved to speak to the woman who had stolen his breath away. Each second felt like an eternity, but he knew he had to make a choice. Would he confront the truth, or would he allow the shadows of their past to continue haunting them both? The clock chimed, marking the hour, and with it came the weight of his decision. The air crackled with untouched emotions, and at that moment, the world outside faded away, leaving only the two of them amidst a sea of revelry. The evening unfurled like a delicate silk ribbon, casting an enchanting glow over the grand hall. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, refracting light into a tapestry of colors that danced across the polished wooden floor. Laughter and lively conversation filled the air, but for the Duke of Harrington, the sounds were drowned out by the relentless pounding of his heart. As he wandered through the crowd, his attention was drawn to the numerous guests dressed in their finest attire. The women adorned in elegant gowns and sparkling jewels appeared like radiant flowers in a garden, and the men, with their suave manners and aristocratic charm, were like bees flitting from one bloom to the next. Yet, his mind was not captivated by the spectacle around him. It was a singular thought that dominated his consciousness, his lost bride, Lady Isadora Pelham. Harrington's gaze flickered toward the entrance, half expecting to see her glide through the doorway as if she had never left. Instead, what caught his attention was a young woman navigating through the gathering, her modest attire contrasting sharply with the opulence surrounding her. She moved with a grace that felt hauntingly familiar. The Duke leaned in slightly, squinting to catch an unobstructed view of her face. As she turned, he was met with a voice that was simultaneously foreign and achingly familiar. "Would you care for some refreshments, my lord?" Isadora asked, her tone deliberately lowered, attempting to veil her identity in the guise of a common servant. But the moment their eyes met, a flicker of recognition ignited in Harrington's chest, a flame long extinguished that now flared to life. He felt paralyzed, unable to utter a word as his heart raced. How could she possibly be here, so close yet so far away? Isadora, her heart pounding in a mix of anxiety and exhilaration, forced herself to maintain her composure. Serving the party guests had become her new reality, an escape from the chains of her past. She had practiced her voice, adopting a cadence that would mask her true identity. Yet, as she stood before the man she once loved, her facade threatened to collapse. The weight of her disguise felt heavy, and the memories of their time together clawed at her, yearning to be freed. "Is this vintage from the Harrington estate?" she inquired, trying to keep her tone light, unaware that every word she uttered was sending sparks of hope and confusion through him. "Yes, it is," the Duke replied, his voice thick with emotion. He found it challenging to divert his gaze from her as he contemplated the possibility that she had returned to him. But how could he confirm this? How could he dare to express the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm him? Isadora moved on, continuing her task of serving the guests while hoping that her heart would settle. With each passing moment, her resolve to remain hidden crumbled a little more. Yet, she felt an undeniable pull toward the Duke, an emotional tether that seemed to defy the boundaries she had put in place. As he observed her interactions with the other guests, Harrington noted the way she laughed softly at their jests, her eyes sparkling despite her humble dress. The memory of her laughter haunted him, a melody he had longed to hear. But now, it was cloaked in the veil of anonymity. He fought against the urge to call her name, to tear down the walls of her disguise with just a few words. "Tell me, how has the estate fared in my absence?" he pressed, his voice low and almost intimate as he approached her again. She paused, and for a fleeting moment, Harrington caught the slight tremor in her hands. "The estate thrives, my lord, as always," she replied, her voice smooth but edged with tension. "The gardens bloom beautifully, and the staff as well." He leaned closer, the longing in his heart eclipsing all fear. "Are they?" he asked, his tone almost playful, "and do they reflect any hint of their mistress's spirit?" Isadora's breath hitched. That was the very question she feared most. The truth of her absence lingered like a ghost, and she could feel the weight of her reality pressing down on her shoulders. "They do," she replied softly, her voice wavering, "though I fear they miss her dearly." Recognition flickered in his eyes, the piercing gaze of a man who had lost everything yet never ceased to hope. Their connection was palpable, the tension in the air so thick that it felt as if it could snap. But Isadora remained steadfast in her deception, masking her vulnerability behind a mask of indifference. Harrington could see beyond the facade she wore, the trembling hints of her true self bubbling just beneath the surface. Each word he spoke, every glance they exchanged, became a thread weaving their past and present together. The struggle within him intensified. Should he reveal his knowledge or let the moment linger? As their conversation continued, both felt the urgency building, a force neither could ignore. The room around them began to fade, the clamor of guests and laughter becoming distant echoes. In that singular moment, it was simply the Duke and his lost bride, locked in a dance of recognition and denial. "Isadora," he breathed, the name escaping his lips like a prayer, the weight of all he had lost surging forward. How could he possibly reclaim her joy when all he knew was the shadows of the past? Would she even accept him after all this time? She turned sharply, her heart racing as she sensed the danger in those words, the precarious balance between hope and fear. In the flickering light, the world around them faded into insignificance, and for the briefest moment, the truth held them captive, two souls caught in the storm of their entangled fates, unmoored yet undeniably drawn together. The question lingered in the air, a haunting echo: what would they choose to do with this unexpected reunion? As the evening unfolded with an air of elegance and excitement, the Duke found himself caught in a web of social niceties, yet his heart was elsewhere. The grand ballroom of Harrington Manor was alive with laughter and music, the chandeliers glimmering like stars above as guests swirled in elaborate gowns and tailored coats. Despite the dazzling spectacle that surrounded him, a heavy cloud of distraction shadowed his thoughts. He couldn't help but steal glances toward the refreshment table where she moved deftly among the guests, each light-footed step echoing with grace and poise. Lady Isadora Pelham, his lost bride, was the very embodiment of beauty and elegance. But tonight, she was hidden behind a commoner's guise, a veil he had only begun to decipher. The thought filled him with both intrigue and despair. How had she come to this? As she poured another glass of wine for an unsuspecting guest, the Duke's heart pounded in response to the rhythm of the evening. Her voice floated through the warm air like a soft breeze, and he could hardly control the urge to approach her. Yet, he hesitated, aware of the precarious nature of the moment. The sharp realization that she might not recognize him ignited a battle of hope and fear within him. "Is this vintage from the Harrington estate?" Isadora's voice rang out, a beautiful melody that harmonized with the laughter surrounding her. Her tone was light, but there was an undercurrent of anxiety swirling beneath. She had practiced her voice, muffling the very sound that once resonated with his heart. Each word was carefully chosen, and he could sense the effort it took to maintain her disguise. "Yes, it is," he responded, his own voice almost lost amidst the growing noise of the gathering. He leaned closer, compelled by an invisible force, the gravity of their shared past weaving them together. "Are they as fine as when you last left us?" The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes nearly cracked him in two. The estate thrives, my lord, as always, she replied, her smile faltering just slightly. The gardens bloom beautifully, and the staff as well. With those words, his heart surged with nostalgia and longing, but he fought to maintain his composure. And do they reflect any hint of their mistress's spirit? He dared to ask, his voice rich with emotion. In that moment, a tremor caught her off guard. They do, she said softly, her voice wavering like a fragile butterfly. Though I fear they miss her dearly. Those words struck him deeply, they were laced with regret and sorrow, and he felt the weight of her unspoken truths pressing against him. The recognition sparked in his heart again, a flame that refused to extinguish. Each interaction revealed more of the woman he had once loved, the layers of her presence peeling back to expose the essence of Isadora beneath her commoner's cloak. The tension in the air felt electric, crackling like a storm about to break. As she served drinks, Harrington observed the way she engaged with the other guests, noticing how she laughed softly at their jests, her eyes sparkling with suppressed joy. The image of her vibrant spirit flickered before him, a memory both painful and beautiful. He could hardly breathe, the realization settling like heavy smoke in his chest. She was here, yet she stood apart from him. There was an undeniable temptation to reach out, to call her name and tear away the facade she wore. But the fear of shattering this delicate moment held him back. What if she had chosen to remain hidden for a reason? Tell me, how has the estate fared in my absence? He pressed, his voice low, almost intimate. He wanted to draw her in, to keep the dialogue alive, to discover if there was still a bond between them strong enough to withstand the test of time. Isadora paused once more, her hands trembling slightly as she poured another glass. The estate has been well cared for, she replied, the tension in her voice betraying her calm exterior. The servants do their best to honor your memory. Harrington leaned even closer, his breath catching in his throat. Do they? And do they recall the laughter that filled its halls? She locked her gaze with his, and for a heartbeat, the world around them seemed to fade. He could see the flicker of recognition in her eyes, a recognition that mirrored his own. They were both trapped in a labyrinth of memories, each word a tether binding them together even as the shadows of their past loomed large. Those memories linger like whispers in the wind, Isadora replied, her voice barely above a whisper now, charged with emotion. But I fear I am but a shadow of the woman they once knew. In the flickering candlelight, her vulnerability glimmered like a beacon, igniting his determination. How could he stand by and allow this moment to slip away again? He felt the fierce urge to challenge the very fabric of her disguise, to urge her to reveal her true self. Isadora, he breathed, the name escaping his lips like a prayer, rich with longing and hope. Do you not see how much you are missed? How much you are loved? At the sound of her name, she flinched, her facade cracking as emotions threatened to spill forth. It was a moment of sheer tension, a fragile balance between hope and fear. He could see the walls she had built around her heart wavering, and he knew he had to push further. What will you choose, my lady? Will you continue to hide in the shadows, or will you dare to embrace your light? The weight of those words hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. Their connection, fraught with history and longing, surged between them, ready to reshape their destinies. Would they rise to meet the challenge of their past, or would they let this golden opportunity slip through their fingers once more? The tension in the air thickened like a summer storm as the evening progressed. Harrington's heart raced with anticipation as he finally made his way toward Isadora, who was serving drinks to the guests. The room was alive with laughter and chatter, yet all he could focus on was the woman standing before him, her disguise casting an alluring veil over her true self. The flickering candlelight danced upon her features, illuminating the familiar beauty that he had missed so dearly. Lady Isadora, he began, keeping his tone casual even as his heart urged him to call out her name in a rush of longing. Might I trouble you for a glass of that fine port? She turned her gaze toward him, and in that brief moment, he was ensnared by the depth of her eyes. They reflected a world of emotions, apprehension, strength, and a flicker of recognition that both thrilled and terrified him. Of course, my lord, she replied, her voice steady but tinged with an undercurrent of vulnerability. He watched as she poured the rich, dark liquid into a crystal goblet, her hands moving with a practiced grace. It was a delicate dance, and he marveled at how easily she slipped into the role of a servant while desperately longing for the intimacy they once shared. "Have you enjoyed the evening, my lady?" he asked, allowing the question to linger between them, hoping for a moment of connection. She glanced away as if considering her words carefully. "It is a lively gathering, my lord," Isadora said, her smile polite but distant. "The guests are entertained, and the atmosphere is quite spirited." Harrington's heart sank slightly at her formal tone. This was not the Isadora he remembered, filled with passion and vibrancy. "And yet, it seems the spirits are lacking the presence of their true mistress," he replied, his voice dropping to a more intimate whisper. For a fleeting second, their eyes locked, and he felt the air crackle with an electricity that spoke of their shared past. There was a moment, a heartbeat, where the world around them fell away, leaving only the two of them suspended in time. He longed to see the spark of recognition in her eyes grow brighter, but as quickly as it appeared, she looked down, a shadow crossing her face. "Do you?" She hesitated, biting her lip as if contemplating a dangerous truth. "Do you think they remember me at all?" Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her composed demeanor. "I remember you," he replied, the intensity of his gaze unwavering. "Every moment, every laugh, every fleeting glance." The confession slipped from his lips like a vow. Isadora glanced around, as if fearing that someone might overhear. "Do not speak so freely, my lord. I am but a servant now, and it is best that we keep our distance." The weight of her words crashed down around him, igniting a fire of frustration in his chest. "Yet here we are, standing face to face," he countered, stepping closer, emboldened by the truth of his feelings. "What makes you think I could ever forget you, even when you wear a mask?" Her expression flickered with uncertainty, and he could see her resolve weakening. The tension between them was palpable, a thread pulling taut across the chasm that had formed during their years apart. He took a breath, steadying himself as he prepared to risk everything. "You may disguise your voice, my lady, but your essence remains unmistakable." "And what of you, my lord? What have you become in my absence?" she asked, her voice a mixture of challenge and curiosity. "Someone who has sought you across every corner of this realm," he admitted, his brow furrowing as the truth poured from his heart. "I have searched high and low, through every whisper and shadow, in the hope of finding you once more." The sincerity of his words hung in the air, surrounding them both in an intimate cocoon. Isadora's breath caught in her throat as she absorbed the gravity of his confession. He could see the wall she had built around her heart beginning to waver. "What you seek cannot be easily found, Harrington," she whispered, and for a moment, it felt as though the world had fallen silent, leaving only the sound of their breaths echoing in the space between them. "Then let me help you find it," he replied, his voice a soft plea. "Let me guide you back to the woman you once were." With those words, he took a bold step forward, asserting his presence in a world that had pulled them apart for too long. She hesitated, the conflict evident in her eyes. He could sense her mind racing, weighing the risks and rewards of revealing her true self. "Isadora," he said softly, weaving her name into the fabric of his plea. "You do not need to hide from me. I want to help you." In that moment, the dam within her seemed to break. Her vulnerability surged forth like a river, and she looked into his eyes as if seeking the strength to break free. "You do not understand," she murmured, her voice trembling with emotion. "I have done things I cannot undo." "Neither can I," he responded, the sincerity of his gaze unwavering. "But I know that together we can face whatever shadows loom ahead." The spark of hope flickered between them, igniting the possibility of a future they had thought lost. The weight of their shared history pressed against them, thickening the air with unspoken words yet to be voiced. Would they choose to embrace that connection, despite the uncertainties it held? As Isadora looked away, Harrington felt the moment teeter on the edge of revelation. He was prepared to hold on to her tightly, to protect her from the world that sought to tear them apart. Would she trust him enough to take that leap of faith? The atmosphere felt heavy in the air, thick with unspoken words and emotions as Isadora retreated into the solitude of her thoughts, a mere servant amidst the swirling grandeur of the evening's gathering. She could hardly believe she had come so far, masquerading as a commoner, blending in with the very people she once gazed upon from her gilded cage. Yet, now she found herself entangled in a web of deception, trying to remain hidden while her heart yearned for the very person she had lost. The Duke's piercing gaze lingered on her, but she dared not meet it directly. Every stolen glance sent a shiver down her spine, a reminder of their shared past and the fractured bond that had once been the very foundation of her existence. Memories of laughter, soft whispers, and promises made under the moonlight flooded her mind, each like a wave crashing against the shore of her heart, reminding her of what had been lost. Harrington may have recognized her, but the Duke was not the only one in turmoil. Isadora felt the weight of her own secrets bearing down on her, like heavy chains binding her to a past she wished to escape. She moved about the room with practiced ease, serving drinks and smiling at guests, all the while grappling with her internal conflict. Would she continue to hide, allowing the Duke to remain in the shadows of her life, or would she draw him into the light, revealing the truth of her identity and the depth of her feelings? As the evening wore on, the ballroom erupted into laughter and merriment, the sound a cruel reminder of her solitude. She caught snippets of conversation, the guests discussing trivial things, fashion, gossip, and the latest scandal, while her heart remained tethered to the past. In that moment, she realized that the laughter around her only amplified her loneliness. "Is it not a splendid evening?" one young woman exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with delight. Isadora forced a smile, nodding in agreement, yet her spirit remained listless. The festivities felt like a distant echo, drowning beneath the weight of the Duke's presence, which loomed more substantial than the extravagant chandeliers overhead. Harrington stood out among the guests, his stature commanding attention as he moved with an effortless grace. But it was not just the opulence of his attire that captivated her, it was the intensity of his gaze that sent her heart racing. She could sense his awareness, an unyielding force that pulled her closer even as she sought to distance herself. Was it madness to wish for a connection with him again? To hope that they might reclaim the love they once shared? The thought ignited a flicker of rebellion within her, battling against the fear that had kept her hidden for so long. "Lady Isadora," he had called her in a voice that still lingered in her ears, echoing with familiarity. She had wanted to respond, to reveal her true self, yet the fear of the consequences had choked those words before they could escape her lips. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as the moment swelled with possibility. The distance between them felt insurmountable, yet the intimacy of their shared memories made every heartbeat a reminder of what could be. Suddenly, a commotion drew her attention. A guest had stumbled, nearly spilling wine onto the fine carpet. Isadora rushed to assist, her instincts honed from years of service, and for a brief moment, she lost herself in the chaos. Laughter bubbled around her, and she welcomed the distraction, grateful for the reprieve from the Duke's gaze. But as she helped the guest regain their footing, she couldn't help but glance back at Harrington. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of concern and longing, as if he were wrestling with his own demons. That moment solidified her resolve, she could not hide any longer. When she returned to her position, their eyes met again, and the world around them fell silent. It was in that fleeting moment that she realized the depth of his feelings had not diminished. Yet there was hesitation, a flicker of doubt in his demeanor that resonated with her own. The Duke stepped closer, his voice low and laced with urgency. "You have not changed, Isadora. I feel it in the very essence of your being, even cloaked in this disguise." His words were a balm to her soul, igniting the embers of hope that had flickered in the desolation of her heart. "What do you want from me?" she breathed, her voice shaking with a tempest of emotions. The vulnerability etched in her features mirrored the turmoil within him, and for a moment, it felt as though they were the only two souls in the crowded room. "I want to know the truth," he replied, his gaze penetrating as he searched her face for answers. "You need not fear me, my lady. You are still the woman I cherish in my heart." The warmth in his voice sent chills down her spine, the sincerity sparking a flicker of courage she had thought long extinguished. Isadora's heart raced, a wild drumbeat that echoed in her ears. She could feel the walls of her disguise crumbling, the fibers of her carefully woven mask slipping away. "If I reveal myself, what will you do?" I will embrace you, he declared, each word infused with conviction. Not as a servant or a lady hidden behind a mask, but as the woman I love. With his declaration, the world around them blurred. Would she allow herself to be seen, to step into the light where love awaited? The question hung in the air, filled with the promise of change, and in that moment, everything shifted. The atmosphere crackled with potential, each heartbeat resonating with the choices that lay ahead. Isadora inhaled sharply, her decision teetering between fear and hope. Would she dare to finally embrace her truth and take his hand, or would she retreat into the shadows, forever haunted by the love she could not claim? As the evening drew to a close, a palpable tension hung in the air between Isadora and the Duke. She stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, her heart racing and her fingers trembling slightly as she clutched the tray of refreshments. Every fiber of her being screamed to flee, yet she found herself drawn to him, as if an invisible thread bound their souls together once more. The echo of his voice, rich and warm, reverberated through her mind, urging her to step forward into the unknown. Harrington, standing amidst the crowd, appeared every bit the regal Duke, yet his eyes betrayed a vulnerability that spoke volumes. They were no longer just a man and a woman bound by societal expectations, they were two souls intertwined by a shared past, a past that threatened to break through the barriers of their carefully curated facades. Isadora could see the turmoil within him, mirrored in her own heart as he took a step closer, closing the distance that had felt insurmountable all evening. "What a gathering this is," he remarked, his tone light, but she could hear the underlying intensity. "Yet, there is a certain flavor missing that I can't quite place." He held her gaze, and in that moment, the world around them faded into obscurity. The laughter and chatter transformed into a mere backdrop to the electric current coursing between them. She swallowed hard, fighting the instinct to withdraw. "Perhaps it is the company," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremors underneath. "Or maybe it is the expectation of pretense that lingers like an unwelcome guest." Her heart thundered in her chest, and every word felt like a confession wrapped in a riddle. The Duke arched an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement crossing his features. "You speak as though you know these guests well." His smile was charming, yet behind it lay the weight of his longing and recognition that she could not yet fully comprehend. "Perhaps I have seen their faces too many times," she replied, her pulse quickening. "Or perhaps I simply prefer the company of truth." Each word dripped with hidden meanings, and she wondered if he could hear the unspoken sentiments tangled within them. "Truth can be a double-edged sword, my lady," Harrington said, his voice softer, deepening the intimacy of their exchange. "It can set you free or bind you tighter than any chains." As he spoke, she felt the weight of his scrutiny, the keen awareness of a man who had loved and lost, and yet, she was still uncertain whether he realized just how close she was to the truth. Isadora took a deep breath, her courage igniting. "Then perhaps it is time for honesty to unfold," she whispered, daring to step closer. The vulnerability in her heart clashed with the fear that came with revealing her identity. "But know this, my lord, the truth often comes with consequences." "Consequences I am willing to face," he responded firmly, his resolve apparent in his steady gaze. "I have spent far too long in darkness, searching for the light. If you are that light, Isadora, I would rather embrace the truth than live with uncertainty." As the name slipped from his lips, a shiver raced through her, igniting a spark of recognition that coursed through her veins. "Your Grace," she murmured, the formality of his title slipping from her tongue as she reached for a semblance of clarity amidst the emotional chaos. "You shouldn't." "Shouldn't what?" he pressed, the intensity of his stare pinning her in place. "Shouldn't hope that the woman he once loved has not been lost forever? Shouldn't dare to believe that perhaps fate has thrown us together once more?" Isadora's heart ached with yearning, yet fear tightened its grip around her throat. Could she truly lay bare her heart after so long in hiding? "You must know the risks," she replied, her voice trembling. "The world does not look kindly upon lost brides who reappear in such a manner." "I care not for the world," he declared, his passion burning bright. "What matters is us, this moment of truth, of reckoning. I will not let societal expectations dictate the course of our lives any longer." Their eyes locked, and in that instant, she felt the invisible walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. The weight of their shared history loomed large, yet hope threaded through their connection, binding them together with a promise of love and acceptance. "Isadora, please," he urged, the desperate plea in his voice rendering her breathless. "Let me see you. Let me know you, for I cannot endure another moment of pretending." The vulnerability in his words sent a wave of strength coursing through her. She realized that she was not just any commoner serving drinks, she was Lady Isadora Pelham, a woman who yearned to reclaim her identity, to step into the light of love that beckoned her from the shadows. Taking a step forward, she leaned closer, her heart thundering as she whispered, "I am here, Harrington. I am still your Isadora." In that moment, the air crackled with unspoken promises, and the world around them faded away, leaving only the two of them standing on the precipice of a new beginning. With a fierce determination, she held his gaze, allowing herself to be seen, unmasked and vulnerable, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, together. The future stretched before them, filled with hope, love, and the courage to be true to themselves in a world that often demanded otherwise. In that unity, they found solace, standing resolutely against the tides of societal expectations. As the music swelled and the laughter filled the room once more, Isadora and Harrington took their first steps towards a future that had always been theirs to claim, side by side, no longer hidden in the shadows of their past. This was their moment, one not defined by the chaos of the world around them but by the undeniable connection that had once been lost and was now found again.